my name is Fernandez and I'm a freshman in CSE 02 Fundamentals of Programming. And in this video tutorial, we will be discussing problem number 6 on exam 1 of fall 2012, which is converting if statements to a switch statement. As I do the example, it would probably be useful to follow along on a sheet of paper or on Cloud 9, which I'm going to use to explain the program. So let us begin by opening up Cloud 9 and the example problem. So when I approach a new problem, the first thing I do is determine what specific aspect of the Java language is tested by the question. And in this case, the specific problem is converting an if statement to a switch statement. The question is testing whether the student knows the fundamentals of a switch statement, the placement of breaks, and even the implementation of a default. So to begin, I'm going to open these two windows right next to each other. Thus I can see the problem and work on the other one in Cloud 9. Though you will not be able to use a computer on the exam, I think it's good preparation to answer the questions in Cloud 9 to verify your answers. So, what is a switch statement? A switch statement executes statements based on the value of a variable or an expression. In our example, there are 3 cases for interest year, which depends on the value of our year. So, why is converting an if statement to a switch statement important? Basically, a switch statement is used to simplify code for multiple conditions. The switch statement checks all cases and executes the statements in the matched case. So, to start coding, we need to determine our switch statement. Remember, a switch statement checks all cases and executes the statements in the matched case. So, in the problem, our switch statement is num of years. And that checks our 3 cases represented in the problem by the if statements. So to start coding, we have switch num of years. Now case 7, which 7 years, if that's matched, our annual interest rate becomes 3.25. Break. I'll explain the breaks in a second. Case 15, or 15 years, our annual interest rate will become 3.5. And in our last case, case 30, annual interest rate becomes 4.0. Now, in my code, I'm using a default. Now, the default is optional, and I'll elaborate that in a little bit. But our default basically represents if the user entered a different number other than 7, 15, or 30. If it is a different number, it will print out wrong number of years. Now, a common misconception I had when I first encountered this problem was the real differences between a break statement and the default. To answer this, we're going to have to define both. The default can be used to perform actions when none of the specified cases matches the switch statement. As you see in the example, if the user enters a number other than 7, 15, or 30, it will print out wrong number of years. This differs from the break statement. The break statement immediately follows the end of the switch statement. Once a case is matched, the statements starting from the matched case are executed until a break statement at the end of the switch statement is reached. So now, this should be the corrected, converted switch statement from the if statement problem. So now we have the converted switch statement based on the if statement in the problem. And this would be our answer to the exam problem. However, since I'm working in Cloud 9, I'm going to add the scanner, the class, and the main method, so I can run through the specifics with everybody in the terminal. So, to begin, we need to import our scanner. So import java.util.scanner. Next, we move on to our public class. In this case, it's example, and then our main method, public static void main string args. Next, we set input, or scanner input, to new scanner system.in. Next, we have to prompt the user to enter a year to find the interest rate. Meaning if the user entered 7, it will print out 3.25. If the user entered anything else, it would print out wrong number of years. Next, we initialize number of years to equal the integer that the user entered. And lastly, we initialize annual interest rate, which is actually a double since annual interest rate is equaling 3.25, 3.5, which are all decimals. So then we move our brackets, save it. Now we can open it up in Terminal. So, as you can see, our code compiles correctly. So now we're going to run our code. So enter a year to find the interest rate. I'll enter 7. And nothing's actually going to appear because all we're doing is changing the value of our variable annual interest rate. So let's do something else. So how about I enter 8? Now it prints out our default wrong number of years. Now to show you that the code really works and that annual interest rate is actually changing in value, I'm going to print out annual interest rate. So let's say I do 15. We get our interest rate to be 3.5, meaning the cases worked and it actually changed annual interest rate. So to prepare for your exam or even the final exam, you must understand the functions of the switch expression, break statements, and the default case. The best way to prepare is practice. The Fall 2014 Homework 05 is good practice for writing switch statements, as well as Problem 4 on Exam 1 of Spring 2013, or Problem 5 on Exam 1 of Fall 2013. So now that we've done a simple example that gave you the basics of a switch statement, let's move on to something slightly harder. Let's say you want to create a program that prompts the user if they want tea, coffee, or soda, and then ask them what they want in their coffee, what kind of tea they want, or what kind of soda they want. So this example is slightly more difficult because it involves nested switch statements, and it starts using characters instead of numbers for the cases. So to begin, let's start by prompting the user if they want coffee, tea, or soda. So enter a letter to indicate a choice of, let's see, of coffee, tea, or soda. Alright, now we're initializing string and order to equal the input of whatever the user enters. Now we begin with our switch statement, and order, which is going to indicate coffee, tea, or soda. So let's just say the person chose coffee. We'll indicate capital C, or they can even enter a lowercase c. So now what's going to happen is if the user enters it, it's going to run through the switch statement, check to see if it says capital C or lowercase c, and if it matches, it's going to print out, enter, let's say, black or black with a capital B to indicate black coffee. Enter sugar or sugar capitalized for coffee with sugar. And lastly, we'll say enter milk or milk with a capital M for coffee with milk. So now we must begin our second switch statement, which is nested inside this original one. So yet again, we have string of, let's call it, and coffee, whatever coffee is, equals the input, dot next. Now we begin with our switch statement. Switch and coffee, case black for black, or case black with a lowercase b. And now we'll print out, you ordered black coffee. Now I'm going to skip to the end of the coffee case, since it is the same thing over and over again, and I'm sure you don't want to sit through this again. Basically, I'm going to go through each case for the sugar, case for the milk, and then print out you ordered coffee with sugar, coffee with milk, or a default saying you did not enter one of the proper values. Now, this is what the final product looks like for the coffee case. Remember, since this is a switch inside a switch, we need a break after we finish the coffee case before we move on to our next outer case, which is going to be for the sodas. So yet again, I'm putting big S to represent soda and also little s, meaning user enters either one of them, it's going to go through it. So we're going to print out, let's say, do you want Pepsi, Coke, or Sprite? Now this format is following the exact format as the coffee case. So yet again, I'm going to skip ahead. So now this is the final product of both the coffee and the soda case. Next, we're going to move on to our last case, which is going to be for the T's. So I put in case big T and case little t to represent the options the user could pick. Next, I'm going to prompt the user to see if they want green tea or English tea. It's going to follow the same format, this switch within a switch. And yet again, I'm going to skip ahead so you can view the final product. Okay, so this is our final product for our T case. Now, last thing we need is a default for the entire outer case, meaning if the user did not enter a T or a lowercase t, a capital S or a lowercase s or a capital C or a lowercase c, it will prompt them, or it will print out this. So we're going to type out system.out.println, you did not enter C, little c, s, little s, t, or lowercase t. Okay, now that this code is finished, I'm going to run it through terminal so I could show you the workings of it. Okay, it looks like I just forgot some semicolons. So remember that semicolons need to be placed at the end of every print or print line statement. They also need to be put at the end of each break as well. So let me go correct those and then it should compile correctly. Okay, it compiled. So now we can run some examples. Okay, so the initial message appears, enter a letter to indicate the choice of coffee, tea, or soda. I entered C for coffee, and then I typed in black to say I wanted black coffee. Now let's run it again. Let's say in this case I want something else. Let's say I want water, and they don't offer water. It's going to print out that I did not order one of the 3 drink options. This is the end of the video tutorial. During the video, we dealt with problem 6 on exam 1 of fall 2012, where we converted an if statement to a switch statement, and we also dealt with a slightly harder example, which involved nested switch statements. Other help or practice and more problems can be found in chapter 3 of the textbook. This is Ralph Fernandez, and this is CSE 02.